Today is a little two-part kind of talk, a little two-part sermon, if you want to call it that. Part one since we're talking about wisdom sayings, I'm going to give you a few wisdom sayings / lessons from 2 weeks of camp. Okay? Wisdom saying number one good bed is worth more than 2 bunks. So I haven't slept in a bunk bed in a long time. Did it for 2 weeks. Don't want to do it again. Number 2 wisdom saying, 2 weeks of anything except vacation is too long if you're over 45. It's just a wisdom saying. If you want to write these down so that you can reflect on them later, these are worth their weight in gold. Wisdom saying number 3, chicken is the most versatile of camp foods, even in Maine. I think we had chicken 10 different ways, pretty much every day. Am I speaking the truth, ladies back there? If I say anything incorrect, please. Yeah, so chicken every time, every dinner was chicken in some form. Very versatile bird. That's just for your wisdom bank, so you know. Number 4, sand is the most annoying element of nature out of its own context. So think of a rock. I could put rocks around, nobody would care, unless you stepped on them, you know. A leaf, that's fine. Out of their context, a leaf is still beautiful. Water, fine. Lava doesn't count because that's deadly. I'm not talking about deadly things. I'm talking about annoying. So sand is the most annoying thing not in its context. In its context, it's like, the beach, woo! But out of its context, on the floor of your room, around is the most annoying element. So these are things you may not know. These are just wisdom things, so you know. Number 5, good coffee and coffee shops can salve one's humanity, fuel your endurance, and make you feel at home even in strange cultural contexts. So the last 2 weeks, I've had to explore and find good coffee, and it's amazing what just one good coffee shop with the right mug and the right spoon and the right latte and the right setting can do just to make you feel human again. That's just me, okay? For you, that may not be a thing, but I get to preach, so just go with it. Number 6, embracing embarrassment or humility as it comes is much less complicated than resisting it or avoiding it altogether. So sometimes we run from embarrassment or humility, you could say. Instead of just embracing it as it comes, it's much easier just to embrace it as it comes than to try to avoid it. For example, in this particular camp, if you came in late to dinner, you had to run around the building. That's embarrassing. When you walk in and everybody starts looking at you going, because you're late, you have to run around the building. But what I found is, you know what? Who cares? I love running short distances. So just embrace it. If you put your elbows on the table in this camp, they made you run around the building. Odd, but okay, But I just realized, just embrace the embarrassment. This little group of, young ladies wanted me to be in some video that was some kind of thing, and they're like, just do this, say you got more money or something, and they all did it, and every time they all cheered, and then when I did it, the last one, nobody cheered, and it was just a big awkward moment, and that was the joke. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening. So it's on there. I was just kind of playing along, and then I got set up. But I just found, you know what? That's a great embarrassment. I embrace it wholly. It's much better just to embrace the humility and embarrassment than to try to run from it. That's just my opinion. This is my wisdom to you. Number 7, there's 11. I learned a lot this last 2 weeks. Number 7, traditions that should die but don't die can drain the energy out of a community and hinder growth. This is legit. Traditions that should die, and 90% of the people see it, but don't die, can actually drain from a community of any kind, whether it be a church, a camp, any kind of organization. Wisdom for you. This is just wisdom that I gleaned from camp. Number 8, all people are endlessly fascinating, but one needs multiple consistent contexts for discovery. The beautiful thing about camp is you're forced to hang out for 2 weeks with people that you probably wouldn't typically hang out with for 10 minutes. But you keep coming back to the well again, and as the layers come back after day after day after day, you realize that person I never would have felt any vibe or connection with is endlessly fascinating the more I get to know them. And I just think that's a cool lesson, a proverb for us. It happened to me numerous times at camp. Number 9, extreme discomfort, inconvenience, confusion, and emotional exhaustion can be endured and withstood in the dawning of new, meaningful relationships. Why do we put ourselves through the pain of going to places that don't have air conditioning, they're hot and sandy, and the food isn't always, what we're used to, and they're asking us to do things that we don't really want to do, we're running laps, we're being late. Why do we put ourselves through that? And at the end of the day, it's actually just about relationships. You can endure a lot if you have meaningful relationships that you're doing it together with, which is why camp is beautiful. And I think churches can learn something from this, just so you know. We have to put ourselves in context where we're together more than we would typically be so we can learn to do life together and discover the fascinating person that you are. Take it or leave it. And then number 10, clarity is kindness. We've been saying that around here a little bit. But also communication is kindness. Also explanation is kindness. About 90% of what happened in the last 2 weeks, I had no clue what was happening. I was out of I didn't know what their traditions were, didn't know what they were doing, didn't know what they were saying. And then there was occasionally kind people who would lean over and say, "This is what is happening right now." Oh. And then one time, this group even one young man explained to me some significant thing that kept happening, and I didn't understand what was at play. And he just said, "Let me explain to you what is happening." He taught me this thing. That explanation, clarity, communication is kindness, so people don't feel like they're have no clue what's happening. And then number 11, little thoughtful words of encouragement go a long way. One of the cool things they did at this camp is they put envelopes up across the wall with the names of the students and the faculty and staff and everything, and then people could write notes to them and put them in throughout the 2 weeks. And I heard I was just overhearing a conversation from one young lady, and she said, "I still keep my letters she'd been going for 3 to 5 years. She still keeps her letters, and whenever she's having a down day, she goes back and she reads through those. There's little notes, little 3x5 cards where people just put, "You're a special person, I love your energy," whatever you want to put, but that's so meaningful to her. Just those little cards of handwritten notes that she goes back every year and reviews those for her own soul strength. So there you go. Those are my little wisdom sayings from camp. There will be a book, and I'm happy to sign copies of it at a later time. So to close out, I'm just gonna mention something that is kind of, I think you guys know this, and so it's simple enough that I can just kind of mention it, and then you can just kind of process it a little bit. I'm calling this verbal output exercise. A lot of you, how many of you are into exercise of any kind? Okay, I know Larry is. Yes, so exercise, what you do things to keep your body at optimal, condition, right? That's kind of the idea. You strengthen yourself, you try to do some kind of aerobics, yoga, whatever it is that kind of helps your whole person, especially your body. And I want to suggest to you that just as much energy as you put into keeping your body healthy, I want to suggest to you that it'd be wise, since we're talking about wisdom, to have your verbal fitness be just as prioritized to keeping our verbal life, our speech, at a high level of excellence and wisdom. And I want to suggest to you that it takes intentionality, and it takes review, and it takes practice, and it takes patterns so that our speech is at the level that Proverbs is counseling us. And here's why. Proverbs 12:18. There is one who speaks rashly like a piercing sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So the way that these Proverbs work is there's these opposites, right? Wisdom versus foolishness. We've been talking about this. Lady wisdom versus lady folly. And so putting two ways of living, two pathways up for your consideration. One is someone who speaks rashly. They don't give any thought to what they say. It just comes out. Just sprays everybody. And what they had for weaponry back then that everybody knew was a sword. So when they talk, it's literally like, who knows who's going to get hurt? Who knows who's going to be offended? Who knows who's going to, that's just like there's no process there. So it's just like grenades being launched, into the community. That's what a fool does. But the tongue of the wise, it's a whole different way of life. It's a whole different experience when you're talking or living or communicating with somebody who is wise, because the tongue of the wise, instead of like a sword, it's like, think of a nurse and, those little things they carry that have all the bandages and the salve, and it's like they're salving and healing and caring and, I'm trying to think of, what are those little smelling things that you smell? Do you know what I'm talking about? What? Not smelling salts. It'll come to me. My wife used to sell them and not sell them, but she'd buy all these little vials that had little, so if you were having a bad day, there was a certain smell that would kind of and you would ah. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yes, thank you. Essential oils. Forgive me, honey, for forgetting what those were called. But she had this case that had 50 of them, and any issue you had an oil for it. You have an itch. Here's your oil. Your head feels here's an oil. And I'm making fun of it a little bit, but it actually they actually work. It's pretty cool. And so it's the tongue of the wise. It's almost like the oil is appropriate for every issue. It's just it's like oil. It's the smell, the healing process that takes place. And so because the tongue can either be a weapon of destruction or a remedy of help and healing, this is why we should make our speech life such a high priority and consider it. You might have heard the little statement, sticks and stones. It's like a proverb, right? What is it? Sticks and stones can break my bones. Names can never hurt me, or words can never hurt you. Which is absolutely false, correct? This is an example of bad proverbs. In fact, one Hebrew scholar said it this way. He said it the opposite. He said, what is done to you is of little account besides what is done in you. And words do something in you, as we just demonstrated by the fact that some of these words that you guys have told us have literally formed your life and been a reservoir for healing for you for years. So the reason I say this is because we need to take our words seriously. These wise, wonderful words can bring healing. And my question is, though, okay, so what does that look like on the ground? What does it look like to be a person who has healing words, wise words? And so I'll just give you a couple of thoughts. There's all kinds of texts in the book of Proverbs dealing with this. In fact, it's a good thing to do just to read the book of Proverbs and circle every time it says the word speech or words or tongue or lips. And you'll see that the Proverbs has a whole lot to say about the words we say. It's one of the main themes of the book of Proverbs. So here's what it looks like to have these wise healing words. Healing words are timely. They come right at the right moment because there's a sensitivity to the needs of others. So to have wise words, you have to be awake to other people and what they're going through. You have to see what would be the thing to say right now that would be the most gracious and ministering to that person, the most good for that person. And so that's why rash words are so much easier. Right? Just letting it flow however it hits you, it's easy. But to be a person who has wise words, it takes some processing. What are the needs of the person I'm talking to? What would be the best thing I could say in this moment to bring healing to this person? So they're timely, like apples of gold in settings of silver. Proverbs 25:11. They're also comforting. They're like oil. They're like a good smell to the situation. They bring comfort. So if your words bring comfort, that's a sign that you are a person of wisdom who has wise speech. Healing words are controlled. So the Proverbs talks a lot about a babbling fool, which I love that word. It's just like, this kind of rattle on, and you never know what sensitive point they're going to, whenever you're in a group where somebody is doing this, you're just tense. Have you ever experienced this? It's like somebody is talking, you wish they weren't talking because you know what the life story is and the challenges are with the group, you're in a group, and they're talking, you're like, oh no, here we go. We have a babbler that doesn't think about what they say, and they're about to offend, hurt, they're going to say something. All of us have experienced this in our families. All of us have been there ourselves at some point. I've done this often. Just run my mouth, and then later on, Christy will be like, Stephen, do you know that this person was literally walking through this? I'm like, oh no! I was just babbling foolishly. But healing words are controlled. You can lead through Proverbs chapter 10. There's all kinds of examples of this. He who winks with the eye causes trouble, and a babbling fool will be ruined. Proverbs is very clear to call out babbling fools. A babbling fool will be ruined. It says it twice in Proverbs 10, verse 8 and 10, verse 10. Where there are many words, Proverbs 10:19 says, transgression is unavoidable. Where there are many words, there's no way you're getting around transgression or harming others. But he who restrains his lips is, what do you think the word is? Starts with a W. Wise. He who restrains his lips. They're careful. They're controlled in what they say. Healing words are also purposeful. They aim at something. On the lips of the discerning, wisdom is found. Proverbs 10:13. On the lips of the discerning, they have a purpose, and they go out with purpose. Healing words are bountiful. This is one of my favorite ones. They're bountiful. There's stuff to draw from. There's so many scripture texts that we could look at here. I'm going to look at one here, Proverbs chapter 11, verse 24. I'm sorry, I think it's actually 10, verse 24. I don't have my glasses, so I'm reading through the blur. That's a bad idea, too. It's not very wise. 10:21, the lips of the righteous feed many. The lips of the righteous feed many. How do the lips of the righteous feed many? Because it's bountiful. What they're saying is like providing resource for the people they're talking to. So all I'm saying is there's lots of texts that have, one of my favorite ones though is the lips of the righteous are a fountain of life. That's awesome. A beautiful fountain that's refreshing and healing and it provides resource for all these people. The lips of the righteous are a fountain of life. So my point in all this is this should be a high priority for us to consider and to aim our words. Instead of gushing words, we want to strive to spread knowledge. We want to strive to use words that will bear good fruit. And so, how do we do this? Well, it's simple. We've already been discussing it. Make your words few, maybe less than you typically would, so that you can process a little bit more. Don't just spurt out whatever comes to your mind. That's not typically wise. We want to process it and be careful with our words. If we are going to do this, we have to have words that are honest. We have to have words that are calming. We have to have words that are apt in the moment. We have to have words that are weighed before they are spoken. We have to have words that are good-hearted, with good intention, moving toward others. Now, this is interesting. So here's what I'm going to recommend to you, this little paradigm, and then we'll be done. if you're going to work at words and the life of words coming out of your mouth and not spew like a sword at people, here's what I would suggest. First of all, just pay attention to what you say. So today, as you're talking, with your friends, family, just be like in the back of your brain, just pay attention to what you're saying and how it affects those you're saying it to. This is something I do. When I'm talking to somebody, I'm looking at faces because I want to see how it's connecting. I want to see if I offend somebody. I want to see if there's recognition or there's like a blank look, like I have no clue what he's talking about. That helps me to change my words. So pay attention. And then if you pay attention, then later on you can reflect on your words. Have you ever done this? You've had a long conversation, then you go back that night and you're laying in bed and you're kind of like rehashing the conversation. That's actually healthy sometimes because then you can assess how wise you were with your words. And the next thing I'd recommend is feedback. So go to people who are close to you that you tend to expend a lot of words with and ask them about how you're doing with your words. When I talk with you, do I often offend people, or am I, talking over them or under them, or how are my words? Like, get feedback. And then the next thing is, if the feedback is, yeah, you offended Joe last week, you didn't know that? No, I had no idea. Yeah, and you offended Bill, and you offended him, you offended all these people. Then what do you do then? If your words were like swords, well, then you go make it right, confess it. This happened with Jen and I recently. I made a derogatory comment about the WNBA, and I didn't know I had done it. I didn't mean to. It was just one of those swords in her soul, because she loves the WNBA. I love the NBA. And so she thankfully gave me feedback, and she said, "How dare you?" No. She gave me feedback, and I was like, "Wait, what did I say?" And it was lodged in her heart and mind. She repeated it back to me, and then I was like, "Oh, you're right," and she was right, and I have confessed my sin to her, and I will never again denigrate the WNBA unintentionally because I love all basketball. But this is, even though that's a silly example, that this actually has to happen in our everyday normal life. I offend my wife all the time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. She's not here. So, I don't mean that in a bad way. Truth be told, she offends me too. So, what do? We offend each other all the time with our words. What do? We ask forgiveness a lot. That's what we do. What I just said, after I've reflected on it, I shouldn't have said that. That was a terrible thing to say. That was very mean. Will you please forgive me? This happens all the time in our marriage and should be happening in our relationships. Because here's what happens. If you confess it like that and you humble yourself and you say, I shouldn't have said that, it's like this thing in your heart that stops you when you're about to do it again, when you're pulling the sword out, So I would counsel you, be attentive to your words, reflect on them, get feedback, confess when you've hurt somebody, which we all do. And then I would just suggest, before you're about to say something, oftentimes the Spirit, because if you're a follower of Jesus, you have the Spirit, right? And oftentimes what will happen is you're about to say something and there's something inside of you that goes, don't do it, don't say it. Listen to that voice and just pause and just breathe, take a breath and rewind and don't do it. But you'll get better at it the more you're sensitive to it and the more you're confessing when you've made a mess of things. And here's what Matthew 12:34. This is from Jesus. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So Jesus takes it not just from, hey, be better at your wise speech. He says, here's the deal, guys. All that you're saying with your mouth, all the times you're stabbing people, you're hurting people, you're offending people, all these things that you're saying and not being careful with, actually the root issue is really your heart. Do you actually love God and love people? If so, then we will do our best with the help of others, with the help of the Spirit, to aim our words toward good and healing toward others. And Proverbs also says it. The heart of the wise instructs his mouth. The heart of the wise tells his mouth how it should be behaving, what it should say. So let's pray together that God would change our hearts first, because apparently, according to Jesus, this is heart work. And according even to the ancient proverb, it's heart work. So we pray that God would change our hearts. We press into the power of the changing power of the gospel. The good news of the death, resurrection of Jesus actually says something about our hearts. Because that's what the Old Testament, that's what the Hebrew Scripture says. I will change their hearts from hearts of stone to hearts of flesh. So when God does that transforming work in our hearts through Jesus, it actually will affect what we say and how we speak. And then I would just say, let's picture Jesus as the ultimate model of healing speech. And let's try to be like him. Can we do this as a community? I mean, this is something we can do together, which means we'll need to give each other gracious, kind feedback. And I want to say right now, you have complete permission to give your pastor any feedback about my messy words. And if you're nervous about doing it, go to Jen. She will help you. Right? Because Jen has done it a couple of times, actually. This is like I'm lifting you up. So follow Jen's example and say, Pastor Stephen, what you said in the service or what you said in that conversation that offended me. And I will thank you because you are training me to be more wise with my words. We have to have that kind of relationship with each other. We can do that with each other in our families, in our church relationships, in our work relationships. So let's be okay with getting that feedback, confessing our sin to each other, and then pausing and being wise with our words and healing. Would you pray with me?